Lucas had always thought that his bond with Sarah was unbreakable, forged through years of love and shared hardship. Their mutual friend Andrew, who had been his comrade in the military, was practically family. The three of them shared memories of battles fought and survived, the kind that created an unspoken bond. Or so Lucas believed. It started with small things, late-night phone notifications Sarah hurriedly dismissed, unexplained absences, and an edge of guilt in her voice whenever Lucas asked about her day. He wanted to dismiss the gnawing suspicion as paranoia. After all, Sarah had been by his side through the worst of times. But then came the night that changed everything. Lucas returned home early from a routine errand, his boots echoing softly against the hardwood floor. He had forgotten his wallet and planned to grab it quickly. As he approached their bedroom door, he froze at the sound of hushed voices and muffled laughter. His heart pounded as he heard Andrew's unmistakable voice. "Do you think he suspects anything?" Andrew asked, his tone low and conspiratorial. "No," Sarah replied, her voice trembling slightly. "But we have to be careful." Lucas stood there, rooted in disbelief, until anger took over. He slammed the door open, startling them both. Andrew scrambled to his feet, his shirt unbuttoned, while Sarah pulled the sheet over herself. "Careful about what?" Lucas growled, his voice shaking with fury. Neither of them answered. The silence was louder than any confession. In the days that followed, the truth unraveled like a grotesque tapestry. Sarah had been seeing Andrew for months, their meetings hidden under the guise of catching up or helping out. For Lucas, it felt like a knife to the back and the heart, betrayed not just by his wife but by the man he trusted with his life. The humiliation didn't end there. Andrew, emboldened by Lucas's shock, tried to justify the affair. "You were always too focused on work or your military routines," Andrew said when Lucas confronted him. Sarah needed someone who was present. Lucas clenched his fists, his mind screaming with rage. "You mean she needed someone willing to destroy a friendship and a marriage?" Andrew had no answer, just a smug smirk that Lucas would never forget. As the divorce proceedings began, Sarah's betrayal morphed into a bitter legal battle. She demanded half of everything, including their home, a place Lucas had spent years building with his own hands. Every corner of it bore his sweat and dreams, but the courts favored fairness over sentiment. The day he handed over the keys was the day he truly felt homeless. The small town buzzed with gossip. Neighbors whispered behind his back, pitying glances thrown his way as he picked up his groceries or sat alone at the diner. Friends they had shared with Andrew and Sarah drifted away, unsure how to navigate the wreckage. Lucas often overheard fragments of conversations. "Did you hear about Andrew and Sarah?" Poor Lucas. Andrew's betrayal wasn't limited to the affair. Lucas discovered through mutual acquaintances that Andrew had been bad-mouthing him for months, painting him as neglectful and controlling. The man who had once saved Lucas's life in combat now sought to destroy his reputation in civilian life. The narrative Andrew crafted turned even some of Lucas's closest allies against him. To add salt to the wound, Andrew and Sarah flaunted their relationship publicly. They posted pictures of vacations, dinners, and even moved into the house Lucas had worked so hard to buy. Seeing his sanctuary transformed into their love nest was a pain Lucas couldn't articulate. The final blow came when Lucas found a stash of hidden letters in Sarah's closet while packing his remaining belongings. Letters exchanged between her and Andrew, detailing moments they had shared and mocking Lucas for his obliviousness. One letter read, "He thinks we're all just friends. It's almost too easy. He's so tied up in his own world, he doesn't even notice what's right in front of him." Another added, "Once the divorce is over, we can finally be together without sneaking around. He won't know what hit him." Humiliation turned to numbness as Lucas tried to rebuild his life. He moved into a small apartment, far from the neighborhood he once called home. His military comrades reached out, offering support, but Lucas found it hard to face them, knowing Andrew had been one of their own. Every night he wrestled with questions. Was it his fault? Had he missed the signs? The betrayal left scars deeper than any battle wound, etching doubt and mistrust into his soul. Even as months passed, reminders of Andrew and Sarah lingered. Lucas saw their faces in the local paper, smiling at community events. the same smiles they once shared with him. It was a bitter reminder that betrayal doesn't just destroy relationships, it annihilates the very foundation of trust. Lucas stood on the curb outside what had once been his home, a single suitcase beside him. The air was cold, sharp against his skin, but not as cold as the emptiness inside him. Sarah and Andrew stood a few feet away, their expressions a mix of impatience and smug satisfaction. It wasn't enough that they had betrayed him, stripped him of his marriage and dignity, they had taken his home as well. "This is temporary," Sarah said, her voice clipped. She avoided eye contact, perhaps out of shame, or perhaps because she no longer cared. "You can stay at the Hampton Inn downtown. It's decent?" Decent. The word stung like a slap. Lucas had built that house. His hands had held every brick, nailed every board. And now they were sending him away with the same dismissiveness you'd use for an unwanted guest. Andrew chimed in, his voice oozing mock concern. "You'll be more comfortable there, man. You know, with everything going on." Lucas couldn't even respond. His chest burned with the humiliation of it all. He glanced at the house, his house, where Andrew now stood like the man of the household. Every fiber of Lucas's being screamed to storm back inside, to take back what was his. But what good would it do? The legal system had made its decision, and Sarah and Andrew had made theirs. The hotel wasn't far, but the short drive there felt like an eternity. The front desk clerk didn't meet Lucas's eyes as he checked in. Did she sense his shame? Could she see the weight he carried? The keys they handed him were to a small, dimly lit room with beige walls and an impersonal air. The first thing Lucas noticed was the silence. It was oppressive, filling every corner of the tiny space. No creaking floorboards, no hum of appliances, no echoes of a life lived. He dropped his suitcase onto the bed and sat beside it, staring blankly at the TV. The remote was there, placed neatly on the nightstand, but he couldn't bring himself to turn it on. Instead, his phone buzzed. A message from Sarah. "Andrew and I left a few of your things at the house. If you need anything else, let me know. We'll see if we can arrange something." Arrange something. As though he were a tenant needing approval from his landlord. His grip tightened around the phone until his knuckles turned white. He wanted to scream, to throw it across the room, but all he did was set it down carefully. The humiliation only deepened as the days passed. Sarah and Andrew had wasted no time spreading the story of Lucas's departure. Within days, the small town was abuzz with gossip. Every glance Lucas caught felt like a judgment. Every whispered conversation seemed to stop abruptly when he entered the room. He stopped by the grocery store, only to see the cashier exchange a knowing look with the bag boy. The whispers weren't even subtle anymore. "Isn't that the guy whose wife ran off with his friend?" "Yeah, and they let him keep almost nothing." Lucas left without buying anything, his appetite disappearing along with his pride. Even his military comrades, the men who had once trusted him with their lives, seemed to falter. A call from an old friend brought no solace. "Hey, Lucas, I heard what happened," the voice said, hesitant. "You know, if you need anything." It was pity. Lucas hated pity more than the betrayal itself. Sarah and Andrew's cruelty wasn't limited to words. One afternoon, Lucas received a message from the bank. His joint account with Sarah was frozen. Apparently, there had been a misunderstanding. Lucas knew better. They wanted to ensure he had as little control over his life as possible. Forced to dip into his savings, Lucas found himself counting every penny. The once proud man who had provided for his family now found himself budgeting for cheap meals and gas for his truck. When his phone rang again, it was Andrew. "Hey, Lucas," Andrew said, his tone light as if they were still friends. "I just wanted to check in. Sarah was worried about you, you know. Thought you might not be handling things well." Lucas clenched his teeth. "What do you want, Andrew?" "Look, I know this is hard," Andrew continued, ignoring the bitterness in Lucas's voice. "But you've got to move on, man. Sarah, you were happy now. We just want the best for you." "Happy?" Lucas spat the word like venom. "You call this happiness? Destroying lives?" Andrew chuckled, a low, condescending sound. "Come on, don't be like that. You're free now. No strings, no responsibilities. Some people would kill for that." The line went dead before Lucas could respond. One evening, Lucas made the mistake of going out to a local bar, hoping for some semblance of normalcy. Instead, he found Andrew and Sarah already there, laughing and surrounded by mutual friends. Lucas froze, his chest tightening as he realized they had claimed not only his home but his social circle as well. When Andrew spotted him, he raised a glass in mock salute. To Lucas, he called out loudly, drawing the attention of everyone around. The man who knew when to let go. The laughter that followed was deafening. Lucas turned on his heel and left, his face burning with shame. The final blow came when Sarah sent him an invitation to their engagement party. "We thought it would be a good way to mend fences," the note read. "You're still important to us, Lucas." It was as though they wanted to parade their victory in front of him, to solidify their dominance. Lucas ripped the card in half, the pieces falling to the floor like broken shards of his pride. Each night at the hotel, Lucas stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment that had led to this point. He thought of the nights he'd held Sarah after nightmares, the times he and Andrew had laughed over beers. Those memories felt like taunts now, mocking the man he had been. The hotel room became his exile, a place where he was invisible, unimportant, discarded. Every knock on the door made his stomach twist, as though it might bring more bad news, more humiliation. Lucas was alone, abandoned by the people who were supposed to be his family, his friends. And yet, deep down, a small ember of resolve began to burn. He didn't know how or when, but he knew this. He would not let Sarah and Andrew have the final word. Lucas stood outside the house that used to be his home, the sight of it a mix of familiarity and bitterness. The once warm facade now seemed alien, a monument to betrayal. He had been here countless times before, yet now it felt like enemy territory. This was his final visit. Sarah had messaged him to pick up the last of his things. But Lucas had more on his mind than retrieving belongings. When he stepped inside, the memories hit him like a wave. The living room, where they had spent nights laughing and watching movies, was now neatly arranged with subtle changes that screamed Andrew's influence. A framed photo of Sarah and Andrew stood brazenly on the mantelpiece, where their wedding photo had once been. Sarah appeared from the kitchen, her smile tight and rehearsed. "I'm glad you came to get your stuff. It's time to move forward, Lucas." "Move forward," Lucas echoed, his voice devoid of emotion. He glanced at Andrew, who entered moments later, looking too comfortable in Lucas's house. Andrew leaned casually against the doorframe, his expression smug. Lucas forced himself to stay calm. "Let's cut the pleasantries. I'm not here for closure. I'm here to expose you both." Sarah stiffened, but Andrew laughed, a mocking sound that filled the room. "What are you going to expose, Lucas? That we're in love? Everyone already knows. Is that what you call it?" Lucas retorted, his voice growing sharper. "Because I've seen enough to know this isn't love, it's a pattern." Sarah's face paled. "What are you talking about?" Lucas stepped closer, his presence filling the room. "I wasn't going to dig, but after everything you put me through, I couldn't ignore the trail you left behind. Andrew, did you tell Sarah about your fling with Amanda while we were on deployment? Or how about the time you spent half a year staying late at work for those little rendezvous with that secretary? You're a walking hypocrisy, and Sarah—" "Stop," Sarah interjected, her voice trembling. "That's not true. Isn't it?" Lucas barked, his anger finally breaking through. "Do you really think Andrew is different now? That you're the exception? I trusted him, Sarah. Just like you do. And he betrayed me. What makes you think you're immune?" Andrew's smug demeanor cracked, his confidence faltering. "You don't know what you're talking about?" Lucas turned his gaze to him, his eyes blazing. "I know enough. I know you've done this before, over and over. You're not in love with her, you're in love with the chase, the thrill of stealing what isn't yours. Once that fades, so will you." Sarah's expression shifted from defiance to doubt. "Is that true, Andrew?" Andrew scoffed, but his discomfort was clear. "Don't listen to him, Sarah. He's just bitter." Lucas didn't let up. "Bitter? But that doesn't mean I'm wrong. And Sarah, let's not pretend you're blameless. Do you think I didn't notice your little emotional connections with other men over the years? This isn't the first time you've crossed a line. It's just the first time you've been caught." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but Lucas pressed on. You both built this entire relationship on lies and deceit. Do you think you can make something lasting out of that? You betrayed me, Sarah. You betrayed our vows. And Andrew, you betrayed every bond of trust we ever had. You deserve each other, but don't expect anyone to believe your story of true love. The room was suffocatingly silent, the weight of Lucas's words hanging heavy in the air. Sarah finally spoke, her voice weak. You don't understand. You don't know how hard it was. Lucas cut her off. Hard? You think what you did was hard? You had choices. You could have been honest. You could have walked away before dragging me through the mud. But you didn't. You both chose the coward's path, and now you expect sympathy? Spare me. Andrew's temper flared. You need to leave, Lucas. You've said your piece. Lucas smirked bitterly. Not quite. One last thing. He pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. I recorded everything you just admitted. The lies, the affairs, it's all here. Maybe the town deserves to know the truth. Maybe your perfect little story needs some context. Sarah gasped, and Andrew's face turned crimson. You wouldn't? Try me, Lucas said coldly. I've got nothing left to lose. Andrew lunged forward, but Lucas stood his ground, towering over him with a quiet intensity. Touch me, and I'll make sure this gets everywhere. Back off. Andrew froze, his bravado evaporating. Lucas turned to Sarah one last time. You wanted me gone. Well, you got your wish. But don't fool yourself into thinking you've won. You've built your future on a foundation of betrayal. Good luck with that. Without another word, Lucas walked out, leaving them standing in the ruins of their own hypocrisy. The door slammed shut behind him, the sound reverberating through the house like a final judgment. As he drove away, Lucas felt a strange sense of closure. The pain hadn't disappeared, but the confrontation had given him something he hadn't felt in weeks: control. For the first time since the betrayal, he wasn't the victim. And while the road ahead was uncertain, Lucas knew he would no longer carry their shame. That burden now belonged to Sarah and Andrew alone. Lucas sat alone in the hotel room, staring at the thin, cream-colored walls that offered no comfort. In his hand, he held a picture of Emma and Liam. They were his world, the one thing that had kept him going through this ordeal. But now, their lives had been upended by the very people who were supposed to protect them. He thought about Emma, 8 years old, with her curious eyes and a smile that could brighten even the darkest day. She had inherited Sarah's golden hair and Lucas's stubborn streak. Then there was Liam, only 5, still navigating the confusing world of kindergarten and tying his shoes. He idolized Lucas, always tugging at his pant leg, asking him to play. Now, everything had changed. The laughter that once filled their home had been replaced by tension and whispers. The family dinners where they shared stories of their day were gone, replaced by cold silences and awkward exchanges. Lucas couldn't stop replaying the moment when Emma asked him, her small face crumpled with confusion, "Daddy, why don't you live with us anymore?" What could he say? That her mother had betrayed their family? That the man she called Uncle Andrew was now the reason her parents were no longer together? The thought twisted in his gut like a knife. The next day, Lucas met Sarah and Andrew at the park for a court-mandated custody discussion. Emma and Liam played on the swings, oblivious to the storm brewing around them. Lucas watched as Sarah leaned into Andrew, her hand casually resting on his arm. The sight made his stomach churn, but he forced himself to focus. We need to talk about how this is affecting the kids, Lucas began, his voice steady but tinged with anger. Andrew rolled his eyes. Here we go again. Lucas, they're fine. Kids are resilient. Lucas's jaw tightened. Resilient? Is that what you call Emma crying herself to sleep because she thinks it's her fault? Or Liam asking me if I'm ever coming back? They're not fine, Andrew. You've torn apart their lives, and you're acting like it's no big deal. Sarah looked away, guilt flickering across her face. We're doing our best, Lucas. They'll adjust. Adjust? Lucas snapped, his voice rising. To what? To having their mother parading her affair partner around like he's their new dad? To losing the stability they had? Do you even hear yourselves? Emma ran up then, clutching a dandelion she'd picked. Daddy, look, she said, beaming. Lucas's heart clenched as he knelt to take the flower, forcing a smile. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," he said, his voice soft. Emma's smile faltered as she glanced at Sarah and Andrew. "Are you coming home soon, Daddy?" Lucas froze, the weight of her question crushing him. "I don't know. But I'll always be here for you, no matter what." She nodded solemnly and ran back to the swings. Lucas turned back to Sarah, his voice low but seething. "Do you see what this is doing to them? They're kids, Sarah. They don't understand why everything they knew is gone." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but Andrew stepped in, his tone defensive. "Look, we're trying to make this work, okay? You're just making it harder by playing the victim." "Victim?" Lucas's voice cracked with disbelief. "You think this is about me? This is about them. They didn't ask for any of this. They had a happy home, and you ripped it apart for what? For some fleeting affair?" The conversation ended with no resolution, as it always did. Lucas left the park feeling more defeated than ever. That night, as he lay in the cramped hotel bed, he thought about the future. How would Emma and Liam navigate a world where their parents couldn't even be in the same room without hostility? Would they grow up resenting him? Or worse, blaming themselves? Lucas resolved to be there for them, no matter what. He would shield them from the worst of this chaos, even if it meant swallowing his pride and enduring the constant humiliation of Sarah and Andrew's presence. The next weekend, Lucas had his scheduled visitation. Emma and Liam burst through the door of his hotel room, their faces lighting up at the sight of him. "Daddy!" Liam cried, leaping into his arms. Lucas held him tightly, fighting back tears. Emma climbed onto the bed, her small hands exploring the room. "It's so small," she said innocently. Lucas forced a laugh. "It's cozy. But it's just for now." Emma looked at him seriously. "Why can't we all live together again?" "I don't like it this way." Liam nodded solemnly. "Yeah, I don't like it either." Lucas knelt in front of them, his heart breaking. "I know, kiddos. I don't like it either. But sometimes, grown-ups make mistakes, and we have to figure out a new way to be a family." Emma frowned. "Did Mommy make a mistake?" Lucas hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Mommy and I both made mistakes. But no matter what, we both love you very much." Liam hugged him tightly. "I love you, Daddy." As the weeks turned into months, Lucas fought to create a sense of normalcy for his children. He took them to the park, helped Emma with her school projects, and built pillow forts in the tiny hotel room. But every time he dropped them off at the house, he saw the toll it was taking. Emma became quieter, her once bright spirit dimmed. Liam started acting out, throwing tantrums over the smallest things. Lucas tried to address it with Sarah, but she dismissed his concerns. "They're just adjusting," she said. "You're overreacting." "No, Sarah," Lucas shot back. "They're struggling because they don't feel safe. You've destroyed their sense of security, and you're too wrapped up in your fantasy with Andrew to see it." Sarah glared at him. "I'm doing the best I can." "Your best isn't good enough," Lucas said, his voice cracking with emotion. "If you cared about them at all, you'd see that." The breaking point came during one of Lucas's visitations. Emma refused to get out of the car when he brought them back. She clung to him, tears streaming down her face. "I don't want to go," she sobbed. "I don't want to stay with them." Lucas hugged her tightly, his own tears threatening to fall. "I know, sweetie. I know. But I'll see you again soon, I promise." As he pried her arms from around his neck, his resolve hardened. He wouldn't let Sarah and Andrew's selfishness ruin his children's lives. Whatever it took, he would protect them. Even if it meant going to court. Even if it meant exposing the full extent of Sarah and Andrew's hypocrisy. Lucas knew one thing for sure. He had lost his marriage, his home, and his pride, but he would not lose his children. Lucas stood outside the courthouse, the gray clouds overhead mirroring the storm in his heart. The custody proceedings had concluded, granting him regular visitation rights, but the victory felt hollow. Every interaction with Sarah and Andrew only deepened his anger, a wound reopened each time he saw their faces. Today, Lucas had resolved to make his boundaries clear once and for all. He drove to Sarah and Andrew's house for a scheduled drop-off. Emma and Liam sat quietly in the back seat, their usual chatter replaced by a heavy silence. Lucas parked, took a deep breath, and turned to his children. "All right, kiddos, he said gently, forcing a smile. Time to head back to Mom's. I'll see you in a few days, okay? Liam nodded solemnly, while Emma hesitated, her small hand clutching his sleeve. I don't want to go, she whispered. Lucas crouched down to her level, his heart breaking. I know, sweetheart. But you have to. I promise I'll call you every night, and we'll have so much fun next weekend. Emma nodded reluctantly, her eyes brimming with tears. Lucas kissed the top of her head and watched as the two walked slowly toward the house. Sarah opened the door, her expression neutral, but Andrew loomed behind her, his smirk like a slap in the face. As soon as the door closed, Lucas squared his shoulders and marched up the walkway. He wasn't leaving without saying his piece. Sarah opened the door again, surprised to see him standing there. Is something wrong? Yes, Lucas said sharply, his voice steady. We need to talk. Both of you. Andrew sauntered into the doorway, arms crossed, his cocky grin firmly in place. What's this about now, Lucas? Lucas ignored the bait. This is the last time I'm saying this, so listen carefully. From now on, I will communicate with Sarah only and only about the kids. Andrew, you're not part of that equation. Stay out of my way. Andrew snorted. Oh, come on. What's the big deal? We're all adults here. Lucas stepped closer, his voice dangerously low. You don't get to decide how this works. You've already taken enough from me, my marriage, my home, my sense of peace. But you don't get to take anything more. Stay out of my life, Andrew. Completely. Andrew's grin faltered, replaced by a flicker of irritation. I live here, Lucas. You're going to have to deal with that. No, Lucas said firmly. I don't. When I come here, it's for Emma and Liam, not you. I don't care if you hide in the basement or leave the house, but you stay out of sight. If you don't, there will be consequences. Sarah stepped forward, her voice defensive. Lucas, that's not fair. Andrew is part of my life now, which means he's part of the kids' lives, too. Lucas turned his glare on her, the anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. You can delude yourself into thinking he's some kind of father figure, but he'll never replace me. And if I catch him overstepping, if I hear one word about him disciplining my kids or playing the dad role, I'll make sure the courts know about every dirty secret you two are hiding. Do you understand me? Sarah's face flushed with indignation. You're being unreasonable? No, Sarah, Lucas interrupted. Unreasonable was you betraying our family for this parasite. He jabbed a finger in Andrew's direction. I am their father, and that's never going to change. Andrew's composure cracked. You think you can intimidate me? I'm not afraid of you, Lucas. Lucas stepped closer, his voice a low growl. You should be. You have no idea what I'm capable of. You've already underestimated me once, that won't happen again. For a moment, the tension was suffocating, the three of them locked in a silent standoff. Finally, Andrew broke eye contact, muttering something under his breath. Lucas straightened, his expression hard. This is the last time I'm having this conversation. Next time, there won't be warnings. He turned to Sarah, his voice softening slightly but losing none of its edge. I'll do whatever it takes to protect Emma and Liam. But you're on your own. Don't expect any help, and don't expect me to care when this falls apart. Because it will, Sarah. Sooner or later, you'll see him for what he really is. Sarah looked away, her jaw tight, but Lucas could see the doubt creeping into her expression. Without another word, he turned and walked back to his car. He didn't look back as he drove away, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. That night, Lucas sat in his hotel room, replaying the confrontation in his mind. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving a hollow ache in its place. He knew this wasn't over, not really. There would be more battles, more tension, more pain. But for the first time in months, Lucas felt a small measure of control. He had drawn a line in the sand, and he intended to stand by it. Sarah and Andrew might have taken almost everything from him, but they wouldn't take his dignity. They wouldn't take his children. As he glanced at the photo of Emma and Liam on his nightstand, Lucas whispered a promise to himself. You'll be safe. No matter what, I'll make sure of it. The road ahead was uncertain, but Lucas was determined to face it head-on. He had lost too much already, there was nothing left to lose. Only the fight to protect what truly mattered.